Hello, Oprah. My name is Patricia Diorio, and I live in Summerlin, California, just over the hill from your home in Montecito. We're actually neighbors. For over 11 years, Oprah, I've done my own television show on public access here in Santa Barbara. It's called The Paradigm Shift, and it's an inspirational, visionary, out-of-the-box talk show about science and spirituality. The premise of the show is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and innately and immeasurably powerful in our ability to create our reality. And the reason why I chose to combine science and spirituality are two reasons, actually. The first is that I feel that science is trying to catch up with spirituality. It has been for a long time, and it's finally beginning to happen. And the second reason is I really wanted this show to speak into the listening of the average person who needs to have that left brain, logical, practical, linear understanding of spirituality. So those are the two primary reasons. I've interviewed many guests over these last 11 years, over 300 shows live, and mostly scientists and quantum physicists. Maybe you've heard of some of them. Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote Biology of Belief, Dr. Greg Braden, who wrote several books, the Isaiah Code, the God Code, and Barbara Marx Hubbard from Conscious Evolution, Byron Katie, who is the founder of The Work, the process called The Work, Elizabeth Sahtouris, who is a biologist as well, and Dennis Kucinich, actually. I interviewed a politician, and Dennis, of course, is a very conscious politician, so it was really an honor and a privilege to hear him speak about the interconnectedness of all humanity. So I've always felt very connected with you, Oprah, over the years that I've been doing my show, and I'd like to tell you why. In 1997, 2 years after I began my show, an intuitive reader came to town, and I was encouraged to have a session with her, which I did, and it was taped on cassette. And I asked her in the session if my show would be successful, if I would get it out to the big leagues. And she said, yes, I would, but it would take a while. But she did say that there would come a time that a very popular television talk show host would move to Santa Barbara, a black woman, she said. She couldn't recall the name. But she said that about the time that this person was ready to step down from network television to pursue other interests, that she would open the door for me. And of course, when you moved to town in early 2000, I scrambled to find that cassette and listen to it, and indeed, that's what she said. The other reasons are actually two dreams that I had, and I know they're my dreams, but I think that they were so profound. They were lucid dreams, like I was actually there, present with you. And in the first dream, which I had in 1995, right after a 10-day silent retreat, you and I were in a television studio, and we were hustling and bustling around getting ready for a show. There was no dialogue between you and I, but there was this over voice, this booming voice that said, "Good friends." That was it, just simply, good friends. And the second dream I just had a few months ago, 2 days after my 65th birthday. I'm also an Aquarian like you are. And in this dream, we were walking in your garden in Montecito, and we were talking about spirituality. And I was saying to you, can you imagine the kind of world that we would have if everyone knew that their true identity as spirit and form, and that they had this amazing power to create their reality, personally and collectively? And you said yes, and what a remarkable world that would be. The next scene in this dream, we're in your house, and it's time for me to leave. And I walk right up to you, look deeply into your eyes, and as I adjusted the collar of your blouse, which was a bit askew, I said to you, Oprah, I may never have the opportunity to ask you this again, so I'm going to ask you now. I have a television show, and I have a DVD demo and a proposal that I wrote, and I would really consider it an honor if you would look at it. Are you willing to do that? And you said yes. And so I feel very inspired to be presenting this audition today. And I feel that the paradigm shift is a catalyst for transforming the media, for bringing conscious content to the masses. And I think this is something that you've been endeavoring to do throughout your entire career, despite the constraints put on you by the bottom line guides. So I would truly consider it an honor and a privilege to be working with you to bring conscious content to awakening humanity. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for seeing me. I'm Patricia Diorio, the producer and host of the Paradigm Shift television show. The Paradigm Shift is an out-of-the-box talk show that inspires us to remember that there is a huge paradigm that is shifting all over the planet today. As we humanity awaken to our authentic nature as unlimited spiritual beings having a human experience, we have innate power to create and co-create our worlds personally and collectively. This show is dedicated to exploring the many shifting paradigms that are occurring today within this conversation. The guests interviewed are pioneers and leading experts in their respective fields. What you are about to hear is a compilation of select segments of conversations that I have had with the many brilliant guests I've interviewed over the years. Enjoy.
When you get an internal life and you come to realize that mind is everything, anything apparently outside of that ceases to be of interest. It cannot compete until eventually you come to realize what you started this program with, which is that it's an internal world, basically. Mm-hmm. That it's the mind that projects anything apparently outside of it.
I really look at the mind. To me, there's like two minds in a way. There's the mind that is in a reaction to everything that happens, and there's the mind that is the observer and the witness. And what I hear you're saying is that we're witnessing and observing that thought and not giving our power away to it, as opposed to, let's say, the unconscious mind or the mind that's in continual reaction to every thought that we have. And I think that's really what gets us into trouble.
It's only reacting to itself. There's nothing outside for it to react to. It's the mind asleep that thinks something outside of it would trigger it. It is only its own thoughts about that apparent reflection that it's reacting to it all.
Around the late 1970s, just before 1980, I started to realize that the research that I was doing on my cloned stem cells did not in any way support the information that I was teaching basic medical students. And here's the bad word, okay? Responsibility. And I remember this is not a great word for the audience, because when I would conclude these lectures on this new science, where it comes down to the very conclusion that you are personally responsible for everything in your life, and I would conclude with that, you would see these audience that were just following on every word I said. And as soon as I said that, they were just like, oh, okay, everybody's let go, that's the end of that, you know. And the reality is, there is no way out.
There's no way out. And I remember reading in your book about the woman that had such an objection to that she came after the lecture and just ranting and raving about how she wouldn't be responsible.
You are personally responsible for everything in your life once you become aware that you are personally responsible for everything in your life. And that's just basically the truth. No one has told us. No one anywhere. Our parents didn't tell us.
Right.
The church doesn't tell us.
Well, they didn't know.
School doesn't tell you. Well, because we've been operating in beliefs that are not scientifically valid.
We're creators of our reality. Whether we like it or not, we're doing it all the time. So what we've been raised to do, and our parents and parents before them and most people today, are create our world by default. You know, and not really accepting responsibility, because we don't realize that we're creating our world to begin with, and that's where that whole victim personality comes in. Could you give us any examples of the power of prayer and healing? I mean, actual patients that you worked with or situations that you researched?
Well, one of the cases that really captured my attention is a case that can only be considered a kind of spontaneous remission, which is a kind of cover word for a miracle type case in a religious context. Mm-hmm. And I must say that surveys show that 55% of American physicians say, if you question them anonymously, that they believe in miracle cures, and they have seen miracle cures in their own patients. This was certainly the case for me really early out of the box. This was in my first year of practice as an internist in Dallas. I had a patient in the hospital who was an elderly black man who had lung cancer through both lungs. This was early on, before there were any decent treatments for lung cancer. He didn't want any treatment at all. It was a wise choice, I think, because we had nothing to offer him. The only thing he wanted was to go home to die in the privacy of his own home. The congregation from his church would gather at his bedside during all visiting hours, and they would pray like crazy for this man. I could barely get to the bedside during visiting hours. I didn't consider this a very effective therapy for this man, and I thought he would be dead in days. And honoring his wish, I discharged him. I forgot about him until a year later, when one of my colleagues phoned me and said, you know, you really should go by and see your old patient. He's back in the hospital. This was a year later. He's back in the hospital with a horrible case of the flu. So I was really disturbed by this. It's like somebody risen from the dead. So I went down to the radiology department, put his old x-ray up by the new one. The old one showed tumor filling both lungs. The new one was clear as a bell. And I thought, this is one of those cases. This is one of those miracle things.
What is your understanding of the perception of spirituality and activism?
I'm constantly amazed when people try to separate spirituality from any of the elements of life, you know. You constantly find throughout time certain corners trying to separate spirituality and science, or spirituality and academics, and spirit, or church and state.
Yeah, I think that well, certainly science and spirituality were separated.
Sometimes we get so caught up in labels that it removes us from the essence of what it is that we're trying to manifest. We're spiritual beings in physical bodies. Part of my feeling toward the needs of others is predicated on my spiritual belief in the oneness of us all, you know, and the fact that we're all connected, you know, and that you can't have peace on the planet if you don't first have love.
Living in the Mind of God, tonight's show, Living in the Mind of God. Could you explain that wonderful title?
Well, certainly. The mind of God is actually a term that many scientists, physicists now are applying to a series of discoveries in the late 1990s. Our understanding of our world shifted tremendously in the last 8 to 12 years. And almost universally, scientists, specifically physicists, now understand that we are bathed in a field of energy that has been previously unrecognized. Some people call it a new field of energy, and my sense is it's probably not so new. We just never really understood how to look for this field of energy. They describe it as it's a field of energy that's everywhere, all the time. It's already there. That it's been with us since the time we call the beginning, or the Big Bang. And what's really interesting about this field, Patricia, is that it appears to have what many researchers are calling an intelligence. They say that this field of energy that links all of creation responds to very specific kinds of human emotion, and that when we have the ability to change the emotion within our bodies, it's through this field. The field becomes the conduit that may carry those effects beyond our bodies and into our communities and to our families, and affect change in our world.
So I'd like to begin by asking, what exactly is your spiritual path? How did you come to a place of speaking so powerfully about this interconnectedness of humanity?
Well, I think for any of us, our own journey begins with our understanding of self and of the connection that we have to the rest of the world. That there's a sense in which the world exists within us as we exist within the world, and the interplay between our thoughts and the consciousness of the world is something that is a constant factor in my life. So much so that when you realize that the tremendous power that a negative thought has, I mean, you can start to understand how wars are created. As we separate ourselves through dichotomous thinking from our own inner truth and from our relationships with others, we understand that we actually create the preconditions for war. So if we have, on the other hand, a view of a world as one, a view of a world as interconnected and interdependent, we understand that peace, not war, is the implicate order.
Profoundly stated. It really does begin with each of us. To learn more about my work, I invite you to visit my website at www.patriciadiorio.com. That's PatriciaDiorio.com.